What truly measures a person's value? Is it the title on their business card, the car they drive, or the number of zeros in their bank account? For Julian Vance, a man whose tech empire had reshaped the digital landscape, the answer had always been achievement. But that conviction shattered on a sweltering afternoon when a blown engine left his luxury sedan smoking on the side of a forgotten highway, forcing him into a dusty roadside diner. Before we continue, tell us where in the world are you watching from? Drop it in the comments below. And if you enjoy this story, don't forget to like the video and subscribe for more powerful content like this. There, under the flickering fluorescent lights, he saw a ghost from a past he'd long since left behind. A woman who was once his brightest rival, now clearing away plates, her face etched with a quiet exhaustion that cut him deeper than any failed stock trade. He was a titan of industry, a name whispered in boardrooms. She was a waitress, her dreams seemingly deferred indefinitely. As he sat in that worn-out vinyl booth, the smell of stale coffee in the air, he was confronted with a choice. What he did next was more than an act of generosity. It was the spark that would ignite a dormant future and challenge everything he thought he knew about the meaning of success. The heat shimmered off the asphalt in waves, making the world outside the diner's window look like a warped photograph. Inside, the air conditioning rattled with a heroic but failing effort. Julian loosened the collar of his custom-made shirt, feeling a decade of corporate battles melt away into simple, profound discomfort. He was supposed to be in a climate-controlled jet, flying to seal a multi-billion-dollar merger. Instead, he was in a place called the Crossroads Diner, a relic of a bygone era with its cracked linoleum floors and sun-faded photographs tacked to the walls. He slid into a booth and was about to pull out his phone to orchestrate his rescue when a voice, tired but gentle, pulled him back to reality. "Be with you in a minute, hon." He looked up, and the world seemed to slow down. Wiping down the counter was Simone Williams. Not a Simone Williams, but the Simone Williams. The girl from his high school who could out-argue every teacher, the one who was the editor of the school paper and had a full scholarship to study journalism at Northwestern. She was the one everyone knew was destined for a Pulitzer, not a worn-out apron. He remembered her vibrant energy, the way she spoke about changing the world with words. The woman before him now had the same intelligent eyes, but they were shadowed by a deep-seated weariness. Her hair was pulled back in a simple, practical bun, and her smile, when she offered it to a nearby customer, didn't quite reach them. She hadn't seen him yet. She moved with an efficiency born of routine, refilling coffee pots and balancing plates with a practiced ease that broke his heart. He hadn't seen her since graduation 20 years ago. They had both been on paths to greatness, promising to keep in touch and never look back at their small town. He had kept that promise, building an empire from a single line of code. But Simone? He watched the slight tremor in her hands as she scribbled an order, the way her shoulders sagged for just a moment when she thought no one was looking. Finally, her eyes swept across the room and landed on him. Her professional smile faltered, her brow furrowed in confusion, and then a slow, painful wave of recognition washed over her face. "Julian," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the clatter of dishes. "Julian Vance?" "Hey, Simone," he said, his own voice feeling thick and unfamiliar. "It's been a while." She let out a short, humorless laugh, her hand instinctively going to her apron as if to smooth it out. "I'll say, what in the world are you doing here?" He could have said his car broke down, but the look in her eyes, a mix of old familiarity and new deep-seated embarrassment, made him choose his words carefully. "Just passing through." But as she was called away by a gruff voice from the kitchen, Julian knew this was no random coincidence. This was a reckoning, and he had to understand why the most promising person he ever knew was now trapped in it. Julian watched her for the next hour, nursing a single cup of bitter coffee. He saw the easy kindness she showed an elderly couple, the patient smile she gave a restless child, and the quiet dignity she maintained when her manager, a portly man named Henderson, with a sour expression, barked an order at her from across the room. He saw Henderson follow her to the coffee station, his voice low but his posture uncomfortably close, making a comment that caused her to stiffen and step away with a clipped response. A cold, unfamiliar anger began to build in Julian's chest. This was wrong on every level. Finally, during a lull, she came back to his table. "So," she said, leaning against the booth, not quite sitting down. "Life took you some interesting places, I hear. Read about you in a magazine once." He saw the protective wall in her eyes and knew that talking about his success would only make it thicker. "It keeps me busy," he said simply. "What about you?" "I always pictured you with a corner office at the New York Times by now." A shadow passed over her face. "Yeah, well, life has a funny way of changing the picture," she said with a shrug that didn't hide the pain behind the words. "Things happened. Family stuff. You know how it is." He didn't, not really, but he could see the story was a heavy one, not meant to be shared in a roadside diner. He wanted to ask more, to understand the family stuff that could derail a star like her, but he knew pushing would only push her away. Instead, he made a decision. This wasn't a problem money could solve, not directly. Handing her a check would be an insult to the proud, brilliant woman he remembered. He needed a different plan. When she brought his check, he placed 2 crisp $100 bills on the table. Her eyes widened. "I can't break this." "It's not for the coffee," he said, his voice low. "It's for the conversation, and for you." Before she could argue, he stood up and walked to the door. "Wait," she called out, but he just gave a small wave without turning around. He stepped back out into the oppressive heat, his mind clear for the first time in years. He wasn't just a stranded motorist anymore. He was a man with a mission. The puzzle of Simone Williams was one he was going to solve. And as for Mr. Henderson, his days of managing anything were about to come to an end. The first call Julian made was not to his mechanic, but to the most discreet private investigator he employed. The instructions were simple. Find out everything about Simone Williams' life for the past 20 years, with an emphasis on sensitivity. The report that came back 24 hours later was a testament to quiet sacrifice. Simone had been at Northwestern for 2 years, top of her class, when her father was diagnosed with a severe degenerative illness. Her mother had passed years earlier. With no one else to step in, Simone had dropped out of her dream school and come home to become her father's full-time caregiver. She worked nights to pay for his mounting medical bills and to support her younger sister. Every dollar she earned went to them. Her father had passed away 3 years ago, but by then her sister was just starting college. Simone had stayed working 2 jobs to ensure her sister could graduate debt-free. She had traded her future for her family's. The story didn't depict a failure, it depicted a hero. Julian's resolve hardened into something adamantine. He formulated a plan, not of charity, but of restoration. 2 days later, he walked back into the Crossroads Diner. Simone was there, the same tired look in her eyes. She saw him and immediately walked over, placing the $100 bills from his last visit on the table. "I can't accept this," she said firmly. "Please do," he replied, sliding them back. "Because I'm here to offer you a job, and this can be your signing bonus." She stared at him, bewildered. "A job? Doing what? Being your chauffeur?" "No," he said, his voice serious. "My company's foundation is launching a new literacy initiative. We need someone to lead it, to build its story from the ground up. We need a head of narrative, someone with a passion for words, a brilliant mind, and a deep understanding of what it means to struggle. I couldn't think of anyone but you." Her expression was a painful mix of hope and deep-seated suspicion. "Julian, that's crazy. This is pity." "It's not pity," he insisted, leaning forward. "Do you remember Mrs. Davison's AP English class? I was failing. I was going to lose the scholarship that got me into college. You spent an entire month tutoring me for free. You're the reason I got out. This isn't a handout, Simone. This is me, 2 decades late, finally paying back the most important debt I ever owed." Just then, Henderson ambled over. "Williams, you got a table waiting. Stop bothering the customers." Before Simone could even react, Julian stood up, his calm demeanor carrying an immense weight. "She's fine," he said, his eyes locked on the manager. "We're in the middle of a business meeting, and I'd be careful with your tone, Mr. Henderson. My company finalized the purchase of this building this morning, and frankly, your management style is the first thing I plan on changing." The manager's face went pale as he looked from Julian's expensive watch to his unwavering gaze. He sputtered, speechless, and retreated to the kitchen. Julian turned back to Simone, whose eyes were wide with astonishment. He had not just offered her a job, he had slain the dragon that guarded her prison. A week later, Simone Williams walked into the gleaming headquarters of Vance Technologies. She was dressed in a sharp blazer, and though she looked nervous, the old spark was back in her eyes. The tiredness was gone, replaced by a tentative, brilliant hope. She took the job. 3 months after that, she stood in front of the foundation's board, passionately and articulately laying out a 5-year plan that mesmerized the entire room. She wasn't just an employee, she was a leader, reborn. Julian watched from the back, feeling a sense of satisfaction that no billion-dollar merger had ever given him. Later, she found him looking out at the city from her new office window. "Thank you," she said softly. "You didn't just give me an opportunity. You gave me back a part of myself I thought was gone forever." "You were never gone," he replied, turning to her with a smile. "You were just waiting. You were always the smartest person in the room, Simone. The world just needed to be reminded." As he looked at her, he realized his journey hadn't been about saving her. It had been about finding a purpose beyond profit and power. Sometimes, the greatest investment you can make isn't in a company, but in a person. If you're listening, think about someone in your life whose potential might be hidden by their circumstances. You might not be able to offer them a job, but you can offer them belief. Sometimes just reminding someone of the person you know they can be is all it takes to help them find their way back. If this story resonated with you, share it with someone who needs to hear it.